Hello, welcome to my channel. Well, today I'm continuing on in the series where I do the sketch for you, which you can buy on etsy.com/shop/carolansart123, and you can download the picture, use it as many times as you like, trace it and add it to 140-pound paper, a canvas, or whatever else you'd like to paint on. I used 140-pound paper for this project. I used acrylic paints. You could do this in watercolor or almost any other medium that you care to, but I used acrylic for this project. So I've transferred my image onto 140-pound paper. I'm using acrylic paints, titanium white, primary yellow, raw sienna, raw umber, French ultramarine blue, sap green, and alizarin crimson. And I've painted a background before I transferred the image using French ultramarine blue and titanium white. So my daffodils have pointy petals. I'm not totally sure if all daffodils do, but mine do. And I'm using a small round and mixing primary yellow with some raw sienna to get a sort of a mid-yellow tone, I suppose. I've also added some titanium white in that to make it a little more opaque. And I'm going to pull in the points from the very edge in toward the center of the flower. There are probably a couple of ways you could do it. I usually paint with a flat, but I didn't want to take the chance of losing those pointy petals. I really rather like them. They may not be realistic, but I like my daffs with pointy petals. Now I'm going to use a 1/2 inch flat to finish the petals off. I'll draw them in from the outer edges toward the center of the petal on both sides. I'll turn my brush for left and right sides of the petal. I don't know if you can see that. And this is only the first layer of paint that will go on. I always paint my paintings with a mid-tone, and then I finish it up with adding highlights and shadows. I'm painting the centers in, but with no shadows. They don't stand out at the moment. That's something I have to work on. For the leaves, which are rather like spears, I'm mixing a mid-tone green. I'm using sap green with a touch of French ultramarine blue and primary yellow and possibly titanium white until I get a sort of mid-green color that I can add darks and lights to and will help the leaves stand out. I'm still using my 1/2 inch flat, but I'm using the very tip of the brush, the very edge of it, to draw down the spears of the leaves. I'm using that same green to scumble in the foreground. It's, in my mind, a grassy area and a bit sheltered, so I think I'm going to put a tree root in there and possibly some leaves. If you download my sketch, you can make as many changes to it as you like. If you don't want a tree root in, there's none there to begin with, so you don't have to do that. If you prefer maybe just 2 daffodils or maybe 5 daffodils, you can add or take away those as you wish. It's really just a guideline for you and not set in stone. I'm using raw umber to put in the tree root, mixed with a little of the raw sienna to lighten it slightly. And I did those downward strokes between the leaves, but added some horizontal strokes to sort of make it more root-like. It develops as you go along. You add colors to it, you add shadow to it and highlights, and it will become a little more interesting as we go along. I always think of this as the first layer of paint. It's not very interesting, but it is all there. And here we make it interesting by adding the highlights and shadow. And some other color, I like to use French ultramarine blue and Alizarin Crimson because I find those colors, to my mind, give the painting a little punch. I'm sure there are many other colors you could use. Those just happen to be the ones I use. Here I've mixed some titanium white with the primary yellow to thicken up the paint on the daffodils a little bit, because primary yellow on its own is quite transparent and you can see my pencil lines through there. So I'm glad I did those tips of the petals first, because I don't have to really put paint on those. They are sufficient, and although I am putting paint on them, and I'm just not very confident when they're very pointy to use my flat brush. That's why I'm doing it this way. I might be more confident on other days, who knows. I'm putting shadow on the leaves now with French ultramarine and sap green mixed together. Sometimes I add raw umber. Raw umber is a lovely neutral. I really like that for adding shadow to things. The dogs are going a bit mad. There's another dog walking along their road and they don't approve. When I have paint left on my brush, I generally scumble it into the foreground because it makes it interesting in the foreground. There's not really much else going on. I'm going to add grass and maybe a little plant or two. But it's a good way to clean your brush off so that you don't have so much paint to put in the water. I put in the highlights where I think the light catches them, and I use primary yellow mixed with titanium white, maybe a little touch of green in there just to make it greenish yellow, and that gives me a good highlight. I'm giving some definition to the daffodil by adding a green, not much, with a dry brush, no water on there, or a damp brush, let's put it that way, very little water on there, and I'll draw some more yellow paint over that as I go along, and it will leave a shadow that will define the trumpet. And I could also add a little raw sienna in there. Sometimes I do that and don't do the green, but today there are green shadows. I think they look nice. I'm using a mid-tone green and a small flat just to put some leaves up in the corner. Not very many, just a little bit of greenery up there to just fill the picture really. I'm using a bristle fan brush. I've had it for many years, probably 30 years. I never give a brush away. I never throw a brush away. I keep all my brushes. You never know when you need a good brush that you can use a pair of scissors on to adjust and make it what you want. fan brush is so useful. You can flick grass on your canvas with it. You can turn it on its edge and make little shrubs. You can do a lot. You could just sort of scumble colour on. I'm going to make the root more interesting. I've mixed raw sienna with a little of the green to give a sort of mossy bark type feel to it. You can put almost any colour you want into a tree root and it will always look interesting. It won't look any less tree root, if you know what I mean. I'm using raw umber to put a dark line at the base of the tree root to give it a roundness and make it look a little bit more real. Add some dimension to it at any rate. I try to make my paintings have depth and dimension and perspective. I'm not always totally successful, but I also like to have an interesting foreground. I like to have my eye wander over all areas of the painting and find something interesting to look at. I like to add Alizarin Crimson to my painting. It's not a very bright colour, it's quite dark and it blends in well, and yet it adds a little excitement to the picture, in my opinion. You know how some daffodils have that little edge around the trumpet of orange or sort of reddish orange colour? I don't know if that's a specific species of daffodil. There are so many types out there. I don't think the orange I'm putting on here is bright enough. I think I'm going to have to add some alizarin to my colour. I've mixed a paler yellow and I'm going to add highlight to some of the petals, not all of the petals, just some where I think the light catches them or just where I think it enhances the flower. I usually paint with the same colour palette. I don't introduce too many different colours. It's why my work looks very much the same throughout. You can always tell my paintings, except when I do abstracts. I think I get a little more exciting with my abstracts. Then I look for different colours to add to make the painting interesting. But when I'm doing something like this, I stick to my basic palette that I showed you in the beginning, and I try to get the colours throughout the canvas. I want to show you the foreground. It's basically a mess of different brush strokes made with different brushes, and that's what makes it interesting. If you're looking up close, it looks a bit untidy, but when you get away from it, it looks like scrubby ground, which was what I meant it to be. Well, that's it for my spring daffodils. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much. If you watched this far, you're brilliant. And I will not be painting flowers again for a little while. I want to do a seascape and some landscapes for you, and show you how I paint silver, how I paint glass, things like that. And I do have an orchid painting that I want to get around to, but I think this is it for flowers for a little while. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.